In the winter of 1942, a young woman steps onto a makeshift stage in a barn somewhere in the French countryside. The stage is nothing more than wooden planks laid across ammunition crates. The piano, a battered upright that survived a shelling 2 weeks prior, sits slightly off-kilter, several keys silent, the finish burned black on one side. Her hands tremble as she sits, not from fear, though there's plenty to fear. Not from cold, though the barn offers little warmth. She trembles from exhaustion, from playing 6 nights a week for 6 months straight, from sleeping in trucks between towns, from bearing witness to what war does to the human face. Around her, 300 soldiers sit on the ground, lean against walls, stand in doorways. Their uniforms are caked with mud. Their eyes are hollow in ways that have nothing to do with the dim candlelight. They've come from the front lines, some for a few hours of rest, some because they're too broken to fight anymore, but not broken enough to send home. She places her fingers on the keys. The barn holds its breath. Then, she plays. For 17 minutes the war disappears. Men who haven't cried in months find tears on their faces. Men who stop believing in beauty remember what it feels like. The music doesn't erase what they've seen. Nothing can do that. But it reminds them that gentleness still exists somewhere in the world. When she finishes, the silence that follows is more profound than any applause. Until one night, one performance, one song, everything changes. It wasn't a bullet or a bomb that ended her career. It was a melody. A song so beautiful, so human, so full of longing that it was forbidden. This is the story of how music became resistance, how art became dangerous, how one woman's hands on ivory keys revealed a truth that war could not tolerate, that humanity, once awakened by beauty, cannot be controlled. Her name was Elise Fournier, and this is what she played for. Before the war, Elise Fournier was nobody exceptional. A talented pianist, certainly, trained at the Paris Conservatoire, third in her graduating class, skilled enough to imagine a future of recital halls and teaching positions, but not a prodigy, not someone destined for fame. She was 26 years old when France fell. When the German tanks rolled through Paris in June 1940, she was giving piano lessons to the children of diplomats and merchants, living in a small apartment near the Luxembourg Gardens, planning an autumn wedding to a lawyer named Michel who wrote her letters filled with quotations from Baudelaire. Michel died at Dunkirk. The letter informing her arrived 3 weeks after the city surrendered. For months afterward, Elise didn't play. Couldn't. Every time she sat at the piano, her hands would freeze above the keys, and all she could hear was silence, the particular silence of a future that would never happen. Then one day in early 1941, a woman knocked on her door, American, with an accent from somewhere in the Midwest. She worked for the Red Cross, organizing entertainment for troops and displaced civilians. She'd heard Elise play once before the war at a small concert in Montmartre. "We need pianists," the woman said simply. "People who can remind soldiers why they're fighting. People who can make them feel human for an hour." Elise almost said no, then thought, "What else am I doing? Surviving isn't the same as living." She said yes. The circuit wasn't glamorous. They traveled in converted trucks set up in barns and mess halls and bombed-out churches. Sometimes they played for 50 men, sometimes 500. The pianos were always terrible, out of tune, missing keys, water-damaged, shell-shocked. Elise learned to adapt, to work around the broken notes, to make music from whatever instrument she was given. She played Chopin preludes and Debussy nocturnes. She played Gershwin and Cole Porter when the American soldiers requested it. She played Schubert's Impromptus and Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. And sometimes when the audience was French, she played Satie, those strange, gentle pieces that felt like memory itself. The men loved her. Not romantically, not in the way that made her uncomfortable. They loved her the way you love anything that reminds you of home, of normalcy, of the world you're fighting to return to. She represented something other than violence, something other than survival. They wrote her letters, though she had no permanent address. The letters were passed hand to hand, unit to unit, sometimes reaching her months late. She kept them all in a canvas bag that traveled with her. "When you played tonight, I remembered my sister's wedding. I haven't thought about that day in 2 years. Thank you for giving it back to me. You make us human again. even if it's just for a little while. I don't know if I'll make it through this war, but I know that tonight, listening to you play, I was alive. Really alive, that's something. She performed through air raids, learning to keep playing even when the ground shook. She performed in hospitals for men with bandaged eyes and missing limbs, men who would never fight again but needed to remember why they'd fought. She performed in the rain, in the snow, in the suffocating heat of summer, her fingers swollen and stiff but still finding the notes. Other entertainers came and went, singers, comedians, dancers. Some couldn't handle the conditions, the danger, the relentless sadness of performing for men who might be dead within a week. Elise stayed. Month after month, year after year. Her traveling companion was an American singer named Dorothy, a woman from Brooklyn, with a voice like smoke and whiskey. They became inseparable, sharing blankets in freezing trucks, trading cigarettes, reading each other's letters from home. Dorothy sang while Elise played, their voices and instruments weaving together into something larger than either could create alone. "You know what I love about you?" Dorothy said one night, somewhere in Belgium, both of them huddled near a small fire. "You play like you're telling secrets, like the piano knows things we don't." Elise smiled. "Maybe it does." By 1943, Elise had performed over 400 concerts. She played through fear and exhaustion and grief. She played for British soldiers and American GIs and Free French forces and Polish resistance fighters. She'd played through liberation and retreat, through victory and devastating loss. She'd learned something profound. Music didn't erase the war, but it created space around it. Space where men could remember who they'd been before killing became routine. Space where humanity could breathe just for a moment before being submerged again. But she'd also learned something dangerous. That beauty, in wartime, is never neutral. That art doesn't just reflect the world, it challenges it. That a song can be as subversive as a weapon and sometimes more powerful. She was about to discover just how powerful. The performance is scheduled for March 17, 1943 in a town called Évreux, 70 miles west of Paris. It's a mixed audience, American soldiers, Free French forces, British officers, and local civilians who've been granted permission to attend. The town is under Allied control, but tenuously. German forces are 15 miles east. Everyone understands this could change at any moment. The venue is a converted schoolhouse, its walls still bearing the scars of shelling. Someone has hung canvas over the blown-out windows. The piano is surprisingly good, a playel that belonged to the school's music teacher, carefully preserved through the occupation. Elise plays her usual repertoire, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Debussy's Clair de Lune, an American medley that gets the soldiers singing "As Time Goes By, I'll Be Seeing You," songs about longing and homecoming. The audience is responsive, warm, but there's something in the air tonight, a tension, a collective exhaustion. These men have been fighting for months without respite. The civilians have been living under occupation for 3 years. Everyone is tired in ways that go beyond physical tiredness. During the intermission, an old man approaches Elise. He's French, maybe 70, wearing a threadbare suit that was probably elegant once. His hands shake as he speaks. "Mademoiselle," he says quietly, "would you play something for us, for the people who've forgotten what it means to have a voice?" He presses a piece of paper into her hand. Sheet music, hand-copied, the paper thin and yellowed. Elise looks at it, recognizes the melody immediately. It's Mazurek Dąbrowskiego, Poland's national anthem. But not just any arrangement. This is an older version, a folk melody that predates the anthem, a song that Polish resistance fighters have been using as a coded signal, a way of identifying each other, a musical declaration that Poland still exists even as it's being erased from maps. The song is banned. Playing it is considered an act of resistance. In occupied territories, people have been arrested for humming it. "I can't," Elise whispers. The old man's eyes fill with tears. "My wife was Polish, she died last year. I have no way to honor her. Just this. Just this one song." Elise looks around the room, sees the exhausted soldiers, the hollow-eyed, the children sitting on the floor who've known nothing but war for half their lives. She thinks about Michel, who died fighting for something he believed in. She thinks about the letters she carries from men who've thanked her for making them feel human. She thinks about what music is for, what it's always been for. Bearing witness, preserving memory, insisting on beauty even when the world is ugly. She makes a decision that will change everything. The second half begins, she plays a few more standard pieces. Then, without announcement, without explanation, she begins the forbidden melody. The first notes are soft, almost tentative, a gentle folk rhythm, simple and haunting, the kind of melody that feels ancient, like it's always existed. The reaction is immediate. Several Polish soldiers in the audience recognize it instantly. One stands, rigid at attention, tears streaming down his face. Others join him, not saluting, not drawing attention, just standing, bearing witness. Some French civilians begin to cry. They understand what this song means, what it costs to play it, what it represents. An old woman in the back covers her mouth with both hands, shaking with silent sobs. But not everyone is moved. A British colonel near the front stiffens, his face darkening. An American major leans over to his companion, whispering urgently. Some soldiers shift uncomfortably, suddenly aware they're witnessing something dangerous. Elise keeps playing. The melody builds, becomes more insistent. She's no longer playing for the room, she's playing for everyone who's been silenced, erased, told their existence doesn't matter. She's playing for Michelle, for the old man's Polish wife, for all the names that will never make it into history books. The music swells, her fingers move across the keys with absolute certainty, no hesitation, no fear. Just the melody, clear and defiant and achingly beautiful. When she finishes, the silence is absolute. Not the good silence of profound emotion, the dangerous silence of lines crossed, rules broken, consequences pending. The Polish soldiers remain standing, at attention, honoring what she's done. Everyone else looks uncertain, afraid, or angry. Dorothy, standing in the wings, knows immediately that something has shifted. She catches Elise's eye, sees the resolve there, and understands her friend just chose principle over survival. The performance ends awkwardly. Some applause, but scattered, uncertain. People leave quickly, avoiding eye contact. The old Frenchman approaches Elise one more time, takes her hand, kisses it, whispers thank you so quietly she barely hears it. Then he's gone, disappeared into the night like a ghost. Within 2 hours, there's a knock on the door of the room where Elise is staying. 2 officers, one American, one British, their faces are grave. Miss Fournier, we need to ask you some questions about your performance tonight. The interrogation is civil but firm. Why did she play that particular song? Does she understand it's associated with resistance movements? Is she in contact with Polish underground networks? Who asked her to play it? Elise tells the truth. An old man requested it. She doesn't know his name. She played it because it felt right, because art should honor memory, because music belongs to everyone, not just to whoever holds power at the moment. It was just a song, she says. The American officer shakes his head. In war, nothing is just anything. Songs carry messages. Symbols inspire action. What you did tonight, it could be interpreted as supporting resistance activities. It puts everyone in that room at risk. I made them remember. Elise says quietly. That's all music does. It helps people remember who they are. Memory, the British officer says coldly, can be dangerous. They confiscate her travel papers. She's not arrested. The optics would be bad. An entertainer imprisoned for playing piano, but she's effectively grounded. No more performances, no more traveling with the Red Cross entertainment circuit. She's to return to Paris and await further instructions. Dorothy tries to intervene, argues with the officers, threatens to quit in protest. It doesn't matter. The decision is made. The next morning, Elise is put on a truck heading back to Paris. Dorothy stands on the roadside, crying, waving goodbye. They'll write to each other for years after the war, but they'll never perform together again. As the truck pulls away, Elise looks back at the schoolhouse where she played her last concert. The Play piano sits inside, untouched, waiting for the next performer. She wonders if anyone will ever play that forbidden melody again. She wonders if music really can change anything, or if she just destroyed her life for a beautiful, futile gesture. She doesn't regret it. Even as her career ends, even as she faces an uncertain future, she doesn't regret it. Because for 3 minutes in that schoolhouse, she'd reminded a room full of people that some things, beauty, memory, dignity, cannot be occupied, cannot be conquered, cannot be erased, no matter how hard anyone tries. The truck carries her away from the war back toward a city that feels like a graveyard of her former life. She never performs professionally again. Paris, 1945. The war is over. The city celebrates liberation with parades and champagne, and the kind of jubilation that only comes from surviving the unsurvivable. Elise Fournier watches from her apartment window, alone. The Red Cross thanks her for her service with a form letter and a small stipend. Other entertainers return to resumed careers. Dorothy records an album, tours America, becomes moderately famous. The singers and comedians who traveled the circuit write memoirs, give interviews, are celebrated as heroes who kept morale alive. Elise is not invited to these celebrations. Her name appears in no official histories. When someone asks about the pianist who played for the troops, they remember a woman, a lovely player, but can't quite recall her name. She tries to restart her career, applies to teach at the conservatoire, her alma mater, and is politely rejected. We're looking for someone with a less complicated history, the director tells her. She auditions for concert positions, accompaniment work, anything. Word has spread, quietly through whispered conversations, about the incident in Évreux, about the forbidden song, about the pianist who couldn't be trusted to follow rules. In post-war France, everyone is trying to move forward, to forget, to rebuild. There's no room for complicated stories about art and resistance and the grey areas between following orders and following conscience. Alice gives private lessons for a while, teaches children and adults in her small apartment, the same apartment where Michel's letters are still stored in a drawer she can't bring herself to open. But even this becomes difficult. Parents hear rumors, find other teachers. By 1948, she's barely teaching at all. She works as a clerk in a bookstore, plays piano only for herself, late at night when the neighbors won't complain. She writes one letter to Dorothy in America. I don't regret what I did, but I'm not sure I'd do it again knowing the cost. Is that cowardice or wisdom? I can't tell anymore. Piano sits in my apartment like a beautiful corpse. I play sometimes, but it feels like visiting a grave. This is what happens when you make art into protest. It stops being joyful. It becomes heavy with meaning. I miss the barn concerts, I miss the soldiers' faces, I miss believing that music could change something. Maybe it did change something. Maybe I just can't see it yet. She never sends the letter. It's found among her belongings after her death. Alice Fournier dies in 1968, aged 54 from lung cancer. Her obituary in Le Monde is 3 sentences long. Former pianist, served with Red Cross entertainment during World War II. No immediate family. Her piano is sold at an estate sale to a young music student for 300 francs. Her papers, letters from soldiers, programs from performances, the sheet music for the forbidden song are boxed up and donated to a local library, where they sit in storage for 37 years, and that's where the story should end. With silence, with erasure, with one woman's courage forgotten in the vast archive of war, which remembers tanks and generals and battles but rarely remembers the quiet acts of defiance that kept humanity alive. But stories have a way of surviving, even when buried. In 2005, a graduate student named Claire Marchand is researching women's roles in World War II entertainment for her dissertation. She's digging through archives at the Bibliothèque Nationale, looking through old Red Cross records, when she finds a name that appears repeatedly in performance logs from 1941-1943, Elise Fournier. Claire finds it odd that someone who performed so frequently, over 400 concerts, has essentially no historical footprint, no published memoirs, no interviews, no photographs in the major archives. She starts searching, contacts the Red Cross, military archives, veteran associations. Most people have never heard of Elise. But then she finds Dorothy. Now Dorothy Harrison, age 83, living in a retirement community in Florida. Dorothy remembers everything. Elise was the bravest person I ever met, Dorothy tells Claire over a crackling phone connection. What she did, playing that song, it wasn't reckless, it was necessary. Someone had to remind us that art doesn't belong to war, it belongs to people. Dorothy still has letters from Elise, photographs, programs. She ships them to Claire in a carefully wrapped package, includes a note. Tell her story properly, she deserves that. Claire's dissertation becomes a book, Silent Keys, The Forgotten Women of Wartime Entertainment. Elise Farney is the central chapter. The book catches the attention of a documentary filmmaker, then a journalist, then a Polish Cultural Foundation, which is particularly interested in the story of the forbidden song, the melody that helped keep Polish identity alive during occupation. In 2012, a concert is organized in Warsaw. A young Polish pianist, Zofia Kowalska, aged 28, performs the same folk melody that Elise played in 1943. The same arrangement transcribed from the sheet music found in Elise's papers. The audience includes several Polish veterans who fought in World War II, now in their 90s. When the melody begins, some of them stand, slowly, painfully, but standing, just as their predecessors stood in that schoolhouse 70 years before. After the performance, one veteran approaches Zofia with tears in his eyes. "I was there," he says. "I was in Evero that night. I was one of the soldiers who stood when she played this. I never forgot it. I never forgot her." He's 94 years old, one of the last living witnesses to that night. "She saved something in us," he continues. "Not our lives. We were already willing to die. She saved our reason for living. She reminded us what we were fighting for, not territory, not politics, for the right to remember, for the right to have a song." His testimony is recorded, becomes part of the documentary about Elise's life. The story spreads, small at first, an article in a music journal, a segment on French radio, then larger. BBC produces a feature, the New York Times runs a profile. Elise Farney's name is finally restored to history, not as a martyr, not as a symbol, but as a woman who made a choice, a costly choice, and lived with the consequences. In 2015, the Conservatoire de Paris, which rejected her teaching application 70 years earlier, dedicates a practice room in her name. A small plaque reads, "Elise Farney, 1904–1968, pianist, served in WW2 Entertainment. Played for the living, the lost, and the remembered." The forbidden song is performed again at the dedication. This time, no one stops it. There's a photograph that survived, just one, of Elise Farney performing during the war. It's grainy, taken from a distance, shows her at a piano in what looks like a barn. You can't see her face clearly, just her silhouette, her hands on the keys, and in the foreground the backs of soldiers' heads, all turned toward her. It's an unremarkable photograph by most standards, could be anyone, anywhere. But if you look carefully, if you understand what you're seeing, you notice something. Several of the soldiers have their heads bowed, not in sleep, in something like prayer, in something like grief, in something like gratitude. This is what music did during the war, not the grand performances, not the famous singers on USO stages, but the quiet moments, the barn concerts, the field hospital lullabies, the forbidden melodies played at great risk. Art in wartime isn't escapism. It's resistance of the most profound kind. The insistence that beauty matters, that memory matters, that humanity is worth preserving even when everything suggests us otherwise. Elise Farney understood this. She paid for understanding it with her career, her future, her place in history. But the song, that forbidden melody, outlived all the punishments meant to silence it, because no regime, no war, no power on earth can bury a song sung from the soul. In every conflict, there are those who carry weapons and those who carry something else. Grace, beauty, the stubborn belief that art matters even when survival seems like the only thing that should matter. Elise's hands built no weapon, she held no rank, she commanded no troops, yet she fought the hardest kind of battle, to stay human when the world forgot how. The piano in her photograph is long gone, destroyed or sold or forgotten. The barn where she played has been demolished, replaced by a shopping center. The soldiers who heard her are nearly all dead now, their memories fading into history's vast silence. But the melody remains. Somewhere tonight, someone will play that folk song. Maybe in Warsaw, maybe in Paris, maybe in a practice room at the Conservatoire, where a student learning Chopin takes a break and tries that simple, haunting progression, not knowing its history, just knowing it sounds like memory itself. The notes will rise and fall, just as they did in 1943. And, for a moment, brief as breath, Elise Farney will be playing again.